Welcome to Show Studio. Thank you so much for joining us for our first panel of the season. So exciting. Lots to talk about this season in general. It always feels like in fashion there's so many different changes going on, and at the moment particularly so many people restructuring their businesses, restructuring how they're showing, getting new designers. Sometimes it's hard to focus on the clothes because you can get caught up in all of that. It's been an interesting New York, I feel, already. So much going on, lots of controversy, lots of people taking offence to certain things, really liking certain things.
Oh, really? Just spill the beans.
Well, you know, I think it's whenever there's Yeezy, it just gets people going, doesn't it? That was a Kanye line there as well. That's kind of funny. So yeah, I think there's lots to talk about in New York, but I wanted to talk about Oscar de la Renta for our first show because I think it's such an interesting time for that house, and I think it throws up a lot of broader discussions that people are always having in fashion. You know, Peter Copping left in July after just 2 years there, and I think a lot of people felt sad about that, and there was a lot of discussions about, you know, how can we better protect designers, how can there be better relationships between designers and the houses they work with, and then that throws up bigger discussions about the punishing fashion schedule. So lots to dive into, but before we do, I will let my gorgeous panelists, glowing in our white setting, I should say we're in our new space as well. Yay, new space. But before we dive in, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Jamie.
Hi, very happy to be here. Thank you, Lou, for asking me to be the first panel of the season. I am contributing European editor of W Magazine. So I cover all the European shows, and you know, I like fashion, and I would love to say I breathe fashion, but you know, it's a very interesting.
You
moment.
like lots of things there. Your Instagram is full of fabulous.
Yes, I'm moving into a lot of interiors. I'm always searching for the beauty in everything. So. Maybe I'm moving a bit out of fashion for that. But you know, that can be another topic for another panel. Anyway, Paula, pass to you.
I'm Paula Reid, brand and creative consultant working for various brands and magazine companies across Europe and the Middle East. Thank you for asking me, and I love your new studio.
I know, it's gorgeous, isn't it? We're hopeful. We've got the camera up there, so hopefully people will get a sense of the studio. I'm going to go to you first, because you say, you know, doing brand consultancy. Is it damaging for a brand to kind of rotating doors with its designers? Because we're seeing that so much. You know, recently at the last men's season, Kim Jones celebrated 5 years at Louis Vuitton. And there was a lot of celebration, and then I realised actually that's quite amazing that a designer has done 5 years now, which is so ironic if you think of someone like Karl Lagerfeld and how long he's been at Chanel. But now, even to make it to 5 years seems quite...
It's a landmark.
It is a landmark.
And it feels, Lou, like it's a bit old school. I mean, in our day, you know, it was very normal for, you know, designers got those big jobs and they stayed there. And the turnover was actually really small. It's like editors of magazines. It was the turnover was just non-existent. They kind of got in there and they stayed. And now I think because of the whole kind of digital evolution of the business, it's a much faster turnover. And I think that is probably something that we've just got to get used to for the future. I think this is the new normal, because you find customers, so say for example, Boutique One, which I've been working with, opened 12,000 square feet in Sloane Street in July. If I say so myself, absolutely gorgeous store based in Dubai and Beirut and Abu Dhabi.
Oh, wow.
Their customer, who's fantastically moneyed, very sophisticated, is totally into brands. And what attracts them is the power of the brand, more than the provenance of the designer.
That's interesting.
Because as a journalist, or somebody who comes from a journalistic background, I always want to know the story. I want to know where they come from, I want to know where they started, I want to know where they studied, I want to know who their influences are. That fascinates me. When we were repurposing the website for Boutique One, I pushed a lot to kind of put that information in kind of SEO copy and editorial and whatever. And the feedback that we get is, don't need it.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating, actually. It's great to hear that, Paula, because my fear of having always constantly these new designers coming out in 2 seasons, 3 seasons, they don't sell. You create a lot of buzz around and then they leave. Sometimes I thought we lose the main attention of fashion, that is actually the customer. You know, when Ralph Simmons left Dior, you know, there was so much buzz around it, you know, the film, the videos, the books, to create that. And I said to myself, this is great, it's going that it's going in a good direction, because the old Dior customer is now leaving that aesthetic of John Galliano, moving into the new aesthetic of Raf Simons. But then once it's gone, the poor customer is going to be confused again. Will they ever go back to Dior? Because they don't even know what the aesthetic is anymore. But by saying that, maybe I'm completely wrong.
No, but I think those big houses. Oscar de la Renta is a case in point.
Yeah.
And because I'm learning a bit more about this Middle Eastern market now, I know Oscar de la Renta had, with Oscar at the helm, had a massive business in the Middle East in those ball gowns and cocktail dresses, because there is a culture that really still dresses up. Kind of like a certain section of, the American community, the kind of New York market, the Washington market, the kind of LA market. And you don't, those women know what their style is and they know what they need their wardrobes to do for them. You don't mess with that without really taking a big business risk.
Is there too much focus? Because you always read about it when a new designer goes into a house on they're going to be modernising, pulling in a younger Is there too much focus on that? Because in some ways it seems like a very pragmatic decision. You think, of course, brands need to move with the times, they need to understand how a newer generation are going to dress. But do you think we're too aggressive in this sense of things having to modernise?
Yeah, it goes back to what Gianluca was saying.
Yes,
I
I think the way of modernizing a brand is also an excuse of a brand to say, okay, we got a new designer what can we do? No designer wants to follow the legacy of the old school, the old designer, whatever, because what's the point? And of course, saying, we want to have a younger audience, because they're going to be the customers starting now for the next 10 years. And again, by saying that, you want that same design and the same aesthetic for the next 10 years. But this is not happening anymore. So I think we are in a very interesting moment of, I don't want to say confusion, but there's a lot going on. But then, as we discussed earlier on, there are brands like Vetements or Balenciaga with a completely new refresh and modernize of their brand.
I just wonder long term if it'll damage brands. I did a piece recently on archives, and I looked a lot at how brands are making so much of their heritage, and setting up museums, really investing in their archives. And I wonder if a huge part of it is storytelling, is to be able to, they have the objects to back up the sense of heritage. And I wonder, if their stories become so disjointed, long term, is the sense of that history and that story going to seem somehow less impressive? It is much harder to tell a story if it's, for 2 years we had this person, for 2 years we had that person. Doesn't feel like that's
But it's a hothouse flower, isn't it? And you've really got to be careful. If you look at Chanel, which is probably the big daddy of them all, how carefully everything is managed from I received a press release a couple of weeks ago, and I was just looking at it in amazement, because the way it was packaged, and there was a bottle of perfume with it. I think it was the new Mademoiselle fragrance, and then there was a fabulous little kind of wrist bracelet that was wrapped around it in white, kind of looking a little bit like a kind of modern version of a camellia. I mean, all of the codes of the house were there. It was, there's literally, as somebody who kind of works with brands now, looking at that thinking, I might have disregarded it before, but every detail of that is impeccable.
That consistency, I do think, the problem with changing things so much, is interesting to use Balenciaga as an example, and I think you felt it with Gucci as well, is when you actually go into a store, it can feel really confused because they've got old product that is still sitting there. The store design perhaps doesn't reflect, the new designer. I think Gucci have done a very good job at quite quickly sort of refreshing the stores. The perfume adverts very much fit with an old design. I just do think
it is a very confusing message, and I think actually by saying that what is going to be interesting is to see if Saint Laurent. Saint Laurent, as you say.
They get a bolt of heady lighting.
Saint Laurent by Anthony Vaccarello, because Eddie, when he arrived, he had literally full control, full creative direction on everything, from the floor of the shops, to the new logo, to the new name, blah blah blah, whatever you name it. And I think the choice of Anthony Vaccarello, maybe it will be a very interesting one, because hopefully his aesthetic is gonna follow that, and maybe
they
his
never would
clothes
have
are
chosen
gonna.
him if Eddie hadn't been it's almost like they were choosing him to follow Eddie. It could have been Eddie's own label and they were replacing
Exactly,
him.
but that's another example of how we'll see not much of a change, or maybe a completely different change. To be honest, that is going to be the most interesting to see. But I don't think there is a formula, a winning formula of, okay, shall we put a name for a brand to continue that, or shall we just put, the studio in there, like it happened at Oscar de la Renta, yesterday? It's, again, a bit confusing.
Yeah, and you kind of see, I don't know, I mean, maybe the designer has become too much the kind of front person. I guess as, kind of before Galliano at Dior, when he really, the cult of personality became absolutely, vitally important as a tool to communicate with. I mean, maybe we've just gone too far down that path and we need to kind of pull back again. I mean, there was a time, look at in Hubert de Givenchy's day, I mean, he was a man in a white coat who, was very modest. Saint Laurent, very, of course he was quite social and kind of out there, but, they were much more, I don't know, restrained.
There was a sense of behind the scenes. It's interesting. I wonder if it's
different
also a bit
times
of a Tom
completely.
Ford
It's
thing,
a really difficult.
Tom Ford putting himself in his own adverts. I just, in some way, it feels like we're going back to that though. This cult of personality around, Alessandro Michele or J.W. Anderson or Dominic Versailles.
But I think you want to have that. I mean, you want to have voice. It cannot just being, clothes on a hanger in shops. You really want to hear what a designer has to say. That's what creates, as we say, content. But it's exactly, you want to know what is literally they've got in their mind, and that's why the idea that the designer stays for 2 seasons or 3 seasons. For a designer, not even starting to tell a story, then it's gone wiped out completely.
But I wonder if those voices are coming now more through like celebrity culture and things like that. So rather than you feeling like you want to identify, I think for a long time consumers did like this idea of identifying with the designer or a key figurehead. And I wonder now if part of the reason so many of the brands are doing these gangs or these, cults around themselves, the Balmain Army or the Givenchy girls, is because it's more people for a consumer to identify with. So it's like, when you buy into Balmain, it's not just that you want to feel like an association with Olivier Rousteing, it's also maybe you want to feel association with, Kim Kardashian or one of the gorgeous Victoria's Secret girls, he gets to walk for him. And I think that's quite interesting, like that kind of spread of figureheads.
Well, it becomes the world of, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So it's not just the designer anymore, it's the whole world that you buy into. And that is, again, part of the whole kind of digital communication. Because it is a voracious beast and it eats up content, as you say. But even that word content is just so cold.
Well, clothes have become content.
But I think also
now,
content, is over.
Yeah,
I mean, literally,
goes,
but we're going
goes.
so fast. But on a different note on that, to create a world around the designer, it's the opposite with Alessandro Michele. Because I don't know if you follow him on Instagram. He's so interested in old references of interiors, archives. I work also. I'm also style editor of a magazine called Cabana that is all about interiors. And Alessandro curated 30 pages of the magazine itself because it was all about interiors, where he went to look for some of places that he loved in Rome, and he suggested to be photographed. And again, it's a completely different message of a powerhouse at the moment, completely away from the celebrities or the...
Yeah, there is this thing of cultural currency. I think J.W. Anderson's doing that very much in Noël.
He does, yes.
He's just opening that, well, he's not opening it yet. It opens, I think, in April or May. He's got the exhibition at the Hepworth.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting, this kind of... This idea, it's like, it's not you that makes your brand cool, it's who you associate yourself with, it's who you position yourself with.
I think we need a voice. We need a designer with a voice.
Yeah, and maybe the truth, and the cruel truth is, not all designers have a voice that's that interesting.
Yes.
Because they come and go. Karl Lagerfeld again is a case in point. Everything he says is kind of digital or copy gold.
Yeah.
And even Azzedine Alaïa, who is very removed from the public eye, his point of view is always interesting.
Yeah.
J.W. Anderson, more and more, I'm kind of hanging on every word, but not everybody has got that kind of communication power.
And the problem is you couldn't be a Helmut Lang or a Martin Margiela anymore, where you tried to sort of stay behind the scenes, because as we've talked about, such is the intensity of the kind of social media melee, that even if you wanted to be sort of private...
Although interesting how Helmut Lang, one of the most enigmatic designers of them all, and he is the one who is most continually referenced in people...
Oh my God,
everywhere,
completely.
especially nowadays.
But it does make me sad. I think about this a lot when I teach or with students, and you think, like, the showmen are the ones that are going to, probably, fairly or not, even at least in the short term, accelerate
Possibly,
fast.
Luke.
But I wonder if it'll change.
They'll accelerate fast in the short term, but the older I get, the more I think slow and steady wins the race.
Look at Alessandro Michele, look at the Valentino.
Of course.
But look at an example like, Dries Van Noten. I actually admire him a lot because he's very much, first of all, commercially does so well. He's a smallish designer because, talking to him, he never wanted to, as he always said, never wanted 7 houses or 2 drivers a day. But it's again another little message that you get from him. But he's a fantastic example of creativity first and foremost. His clothes speak before him, and a brilliant product.
It's perfectly priced. And it's exquisitely conceived. It's amazingly well made, and it sells.
And he's not on Instagram. And it's perfect.
He kind of stays out of things. It's interesting. So how can Oscar de la Renta as a brand? Because they're as you said, this show was without a creative director. They have appointed 2 new creative directors who, I say new, but they were actually at Oscar de la Renta for a long time. They have their own label called Monse. They're called, I want to get their names right, Laura Kim and Fernando Garcia. So they've been appointed, which is quite amusing because they had to change the venue of the Monse show because so many people suddenly wanted to go because now there's this like huge, and the Monse.
It's like Vetements and Balenciaga, the same effect.
And Monse is kind of very different to what you see with Oscar de la Renta. It's much more kind of lots of shirting, lots of tailoring. It is a more, essentially, we talk about a bit more Balenciaga, it's that kind of slightly, the girls all had sort of septum rings in and what have you. What do we make of all of this? You're a friend of Peter's, aren't you?
I'm a very good friend of
So you
Peter,
must have been very invested in the work he was doing.
I was sad to hear that he was leaving, and of course, partially loved whatever he was doing, and I loved what he was doing in Nina Ricci before, and I think at Oscar he had a very, very difficult job because he arrived there. When the day, his first day of job, the day of the funeral, of Oscar's funeral. So he had all the family behind, all the legacy of the old customers. So poor Peter was left, he's
big shoes to
he's
fill.
very European, being in New York, having all the eyes upon him, a lot of interest from the press, great articles everywhere, blah, blah, blah. I think he was doing a good job in a way. Was trying to, as you said, to modern. I don't want to say I don't want to use the word modernize, but he wanted to make it a bit fresher and a bit lighter. And I think he was starting to do it, maybe especially in the last 2 collections rather than the beginning. But it takes time. It takes time for a designer to understand the ethos, to understand the customers. He went to San Francisco to meet all the old customers. I mean, how can you talk to them? Trying to be fresher and modern to keep the old Oscar de la Renta customers. So maybe that was wrong. Maybe he should have never done that. But again, as I say, you start telling a story, and sometimes certain designers take a bit longer to make it even more successful, and then boom, gone.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually look at how many seasons it took the Valentino pair.
Yes.
Actually, I mean, the first couple of seasons were absolutely, completely different from the signature that has propelled them to success. But it would be rare now for anybody to be given that amount of time.
Slightly with Riccardo Tisci.
With Riccardo Tisci,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Like
It takes ages.
No, completely.
And that's what I think we're missing today. I mean, it is a problem of brands. Of constantly searching for the newest, let's sell it, they don't give them time. At the designing, and you would want to make a brand very strong, you have to give the designer and the design team the time to think, to review, especially in a world when you have to create 10 collections a year, and the bridals, and the pop-up, and the capsule, and you give them
But
time.
then that luxury just doesn't exist anymore because behind the scenes you have retailers going, well, I need to, my budget is this, and I need to spend
and every
and
retailer
I need
wants
to
their
sell
own
it.
collection anyway.
Oh my
everyone
goodness,
wants, like,
absolutely.
something unique.
The pressure is intense, absolutely intense. So the prospect of somebody being given the kind of leisure of 4 or 5 seasons to actually come up to speed with what it is they're trying to say.
That's how things build, isn't it?
Of course,
even
of course.
Vetements, I'm doing a big piece
Of
on Vetements
course.
at the moment, and on their first show, which was, it's not a show actually, it was a presentation, Autumn Winter 14. it's a presentation. Like people don't even, but no one went, like no one really knew it was a thing. And yeah, they picked up a huge amount of buyers. I think they got 20 or 30 buyers after that showroom, but didn't really get any press. And then, you know, they did another show, and it was then. And I think, you know, it's not, people talk about it now, like suddenly, you know, they put a bomber jacket in the street and everyone like thought it was the best thing. But that's not actually what happens. And that does kind of, I don't think it's very respectful to the consumer, the idea that they won't have a chance to... You
got the point. It's not, I think nowadays we're not respectful to customers anymore.
I think the customer is wielding a massive amount of power. And I think this is why you're seeing some of this quick turn.
But that's the whole point. It's the customer. But I feel like sometimes you lose that point.
Well, I think if you are remotely kind of arrogant in your point of view, you get found out really quickly. Or if you're not even arrogant, because that sounds like you're taking a particular point of view, that's not necessarily fair, but if you're kind of not connected with a laser sharp vision to your customer, you will be blindsided really quickly, because they have plenty of other places to go. And so, for example, the little bit that I've got to know about how, you know, the whole Middle Eastern customer works, which is a massive customer for, you know, after six cocktail wear and evening wear, which is, you know, where Oscar has specialised. You know, they will vote with their feet if the product doesn't suit them. And then that has ramifications on the designer really quickly.
Do you think that's part of a lot of it comes down to things like data capturing, which has come through sort of online retail. Do you think for a long time it was much harder to actually measure a designer's success? Like, yes, you had sale figures, but it was much harder, I think, to say, oh, you know, the live stream got this many views, or this post got this many likes. I feel like it's so much easier to measure everything now.
You can measure social media, but does social media convert to sale? You can't tell if it converts to sale, and in fact, there's no evidence. I'm sure it does, of course, that's really important for branding, but you cannot measure its conversion to sale. So you can say, oh, it's a massive social media success. It doesn't necessarily mean it's
And the biggest social media for the fashion pack is Instagram, which is like unshoppable. You know, you've got all these like apps that you can add in, but
also I think in the past was also a bit of a smaller world. I mean, literally, designers really could concentrate and checking the feedback from the customer from the main department stores in America, the main department stores in Europe, their shops in Europe, and the department stores in Saudi Arabia. There was no China. There was no. We were not that big, so it's, you know, you couldn't control, you couldn't check all that.
No, and look how the market is developing. You know, that massive expansion into China, and now China has slowed down. You know, but you know, and then for a while America was not kind of producing the kind of business that people had previously relied on it, but it's coming back now, and their customer is a very particular point of view.
What new market do you think?
And Brexit, God knows what that's going to do with us.
I don't want to talk about Brexit, it makes me too sad.
We should do a panel on Brexit and fashion.
I think we'll probably end up talking about it a lot this season. I'll see if we can do one panel where we don't talk about Brexit.
You'll be having people fighting for chairs.
But which market do you think is the one, like there's always, you know, people talk about Brazil, they talk about Africa, you know, which one do you think is going to be?
I love watching those emerging markets shop, actually. I mean, I've been spending such a lot of time on Sloane Street. And I love watching, you know, kind of the Nigerians and the Ghanaians and, you know, what they want to buy. The Middle Eastern customer, I mean, right now, because I think Eid was a couple of days ago, and they're in the middle of a big holiday right now. So you go to Bond Street or Sloane Street, and you kind of realise without that travelling customer, my goodness, where would some of those businesses be? I mean, Fendi the other day was like a bum fight. It was extraordinary. And I think that, which I wish I could have been part of. I could only look on in amazement. But I think, you know, that customer's appetite for fashion and the weakness of the pound.
Is it fashion though, or is it brands?
It's fashion and it's brands. It's both. I mean, Fendi in particular, because you can see all these women with the little, you know, the sweatshirts with the monster eyes on it, and they've got the bags, and they've got the G-Joes that hang off the side, and you know, they've got all of the bits and pieces, and they revel in it. They have such a good time with it. It's kind of great to watch them. And it's a kind of perfect storm now that it's such a weak pound. Their holidays happen to coincide.
That's interesting. So what do we think of the appointment of the Monse creative directors, to Flora Kim and Fernando Garcia?
To be seen, literally,
Yeah.
because I have no idea. I mean, the only thing I can see is the Monse show, and I actually liked it a lot,
Yeah.
especially for a New York brand, where there's not much going on there. Not to be politically incorrect, but I think the show was really beautifully edited. It was a fresh take on the blouse and the story of a shirt. It reminded me a bit of Gianfranco Ferré of the time. The big white belts, and the constructed
great
shirt.
trousers.
I
the
love
Show Studio girl trousers.
this is very this look is very Gianfranco
today.
Ferré. The pinstripe trousers,
very much
big
so.
belt, and the white shirt. That is actually beautiful. I mean, if they can cut that beautifully, it's not a bad idea. And then I loved also the last part where all the sequins and all the stripes. I think it was a very
Cocktail dresses were
chic,
beautiful,
sleek, modern collection.
And I think it's interesting how different it is to, I presume, what they'll do for Oscar de la Renta. I worry slightly for them though that, you think 2 labels, Jesus. I read...
And this is only going for 3 seasons.
Exactly, I think it must have been a difficult decision to keep, but it's done so well with the buyers. It's got
Very
really good
well.
stockists like Net-a-Porter, people like that. I think it's a bit of a under the radar one as well, which I think it must be a difficult decision to sort of keep that going.
Well, if you see, I suppose this is they're looking at the same example of Vetements and Balenciaga.
Yeah.
I mean, Vetements completely being, a completely different message from what Balenciaga is. And, we're all surprised to see what they
and there's an interesting
Diva-
crossover, but I think it's partly to do, I was wondering about this, like the death of diffusion lines. I wonder if it is kind of easier for designers to work across different things because you don't have that same sort of, there's not going to be that same focus on doing a little sister line for your own. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder if that gets a spread where designers can work on a brand that is going to be more casual, more street, more nonchalant, while also working on something
But I
else.
suppose also, having been there for 10 years and working with Oscar, with Maestro himself,
They
who
grew
knows,
up there, didn't they?
They grew up there, so who knows what they got in their pockets, to show. So
Because this is a very kind of youthful glamour, isn't it? You can sort of see now all the kind of touch points with Oscar, and that silhouette is very particular and it's strong. And they have really connected with the customer.
I loved all that last
Beautiful,
part.
the
It was
last
incredibly
section's
beautiful.
really gorgeous. I'm excited about this, and I'm really excited about the opportunity for a new generation to come through.
Absolutely.
I mean, the changing of the guard is always a bit unsettling for everybody, but in the end, I really want to see kind of what new voices there are out there.
Yeah,
and the
definitely.
customer really responds to that. They love the newness. They love it. They love it.
That's
Wait,
interesting.
but who is the customer of Oscar de la Renta now, for example?
I was actually going to ask you
Because
both what
just say
think.
they want the newness, they want something buzz or whatever. But
We're talking,
at that point, you just said, wait, hold on a second. Who are they gonna talk to?
Okay, so well,
And you maybe you know more than I hopefully.
No, but right now, and it's tricky, isn't it? Because you take a brand like Oscar de la Renta, and I guess it's similar with kind of Dior, and you have a very wealthy customer base with a very clear idea of what their wardrobe needs are.
I think needs is a really interesting word because a lot of it is around
Exactly.
requirements
And diaries
dress,
that are
exactly.
planned months in advance
Yeah.
for very particular events that have a very strict dress code. Still, I mean, this is like nothing like my world. And when we were opening Boutique one night, and I was talking to the founders of the store, and the way their customers would buy for afternoon events in the Middle East, for example, they'll buy incredibly formal clothes, incredibly dressy kind of cocktail wear for tea parties at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which are women-only events, and we probably can't even conceive of
Which
the
is
level
why
of dressing.
it's funny when there's I think that set of London designers, Christopher Kane, Roxanda Erdem, in some ways they get quite a lot of flack for being so cocktail wear and party wear focused. Like I spoke to Christopher Kane about this recently, and he said he does get annoyed with this kind of constant being like the king of party dresses. He was like, it's just a great dress. But you understand in a way, that's why they've managed to build their business. It's because actually that's what people
absolutely.
would,
And when I was with Harvey Nichols and we opened in Kuwait, it was at the time when Christopher Kane, Marika Tranzu, Peter Pilotto, they really were kind of bursting on the scene. They were among the most popular designers because of the colour and the pattern and the print. It was really strong. So, those customers really are not going to look twice at Helmut Lang or Ralph Simmons is probably a tougher sell there, but anything with a bold point of view, they really love it. And then, I mean, without wanting to generalize at all, because there is a strong American customer as well who will still dress in a very conservative and kind of grand way for Oscar de la Renta. So you have got to somehow kind of refresh your brand without dumping your original customer. You've got to bring her with you.
It's interesting because I think for a long time the taboo in fashion was this word commerciality, and now I think the taboo in fashion is formality. I think, you know, the cool young design, it's all about this kind of casual nonchalance. It's like very I think, you know, we could talk forever about this kind of gender fluidity trend or fad, however you see it, but I think there is a bit of a taboo about doing something that is kind of formal and feminine. I think, you know, you're not seeing many of the kind of cutting edge emerging talents who are getting a lot of buzz doing it's all jeans, hoodies, sweatshirts, and I wonder if it's a kind of,
I don't know.
It's interesting.
I look around like my area, so I live in West London, and there's lots of restaurants where, you know, women who are not working and have, you know, a fair amount of disposable income are hanging out, and they're all wearing tracksuits. And then, you know, shops like Matches on Ledbury Road full of cocktail dresses. And I have this private theory that people's wardrobes, especially those people with a lot of money to spend, are, you know, either tracksuits or cocktail dresses.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then, you know, the kind of people that we're probably, you know, meeting on a daily basis in our work are kind of more into, you know, fashion for different stages of the day. But it's
interesting. Maybe we need a bit of a revival of kind of dressing up. I think that's a...
bring it on,
I cannot wait for the time to have a revival.
I say this
of
when
that.
I'm like the most casual person in the world.
But that's what the States, I mean, I think in New York you still have a bit of that. New York and also the south of the United States, you know, in Texas or in Nashville, for example, they still have those tea downs.
I think we're
actually in the north of England, my dear, and the north of Ireland. People still dress up.
Yeah,
you know? I mean,
they do.
It's just kind of only in London.
I'm doing an exhibition at the moment.
Exactly.
That's about the north of England. It's about the influence of the north of England on fashion. So I'm spending a lot of time up in Liverpool, and it is like the process of getting ready. I find it so fascinating, and you know, I don't want to generalise because, you know, it's not. I think there's a lot of cliches about northern women and, you know, hair in rollers and what have you. But I do think it's more about time and staging. You know, this idea of like in London, there's such a culture of, you know, from work to this, from work to that, and I find that the formality of assigning time to the process of getting dressed really interesting, and like places where that happens and places where it doesn't, and it doesn't in London. You know, you're always going from work to this, and I noticed actually I went to the GQ Men of the Year Awards and I wore like a really slouchy suit. I didn't feel remotely embarrassed. I was like, you know, whatever, like, and there were people in dresses, and then I thought in other places people would have looked at me and been like, what the hell are you wearing? That's really inappropriate. But people dress so casually. Like, I just didn't bat an eye. I didn't think.
There is no way
it was black tie, and I was like, whatever.
In Dublin, for example, or in Ireland, that you would go out in the evening without full makeup and a proper look on.
But it's the same in Italy. I mean, Italy still, you know, especially maybe Milan is a bit more like trendy, but, you know, or Rome, Naples, all this, you know, the south of Italy, where there's still a lot of women who really don't do much. So they literally love to dress up, and, you know, and they look at each other and say, oh, you wore that twice, you know, that kind of
as
thing.
well, which I think has got lost in a lot of fashion, is like there's very much an anything goes spirit, which is really great in lots of ways, but I do think we're in a I even noticed it recently. I went to a wedding that wasn't in London, and I wore like a black Simone Rocha dress, which I was like, so this is great, and then people were like, you're wearing black to a wedding, like what? And you realise like you lose your sense of what's appropriate, you know, and what other people see as appropriate in different areas and different age groups. I think that's fascinating. Should we have a look at the show?
Oh yes, please.
We can say, so what would we like to see, what do we think a great Oscar offer would be? Does the focus need to be mainly on the dresses, or does it need to be, what would you
know,
like
the Oscar is the dresses, is the cocktail dress, is the you know, fabulous flower print. I mean, I'm sorry, it's the most feminine cliche ever, but you know, that's what it is. To be honest, actually, even talking about the show, I don't understand why there was a need to do a show.
Yeah, that I was gonna. Yeah.
Because the team did this show, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I think it's for imagery.
Being a transitional thing, you know, why the need of a show. But anyway,
I think things I was speaking to it's a multi-brand retailer, and we were talking about this at Fashion Week, and I was saying, oh God, too many people do shows, and she said having an image of the look on the catwalk, regardless of like whether
it really helps,
and there was a designer there or whatever, just the customer seeing that. And you do see it if you go on matches or whatever and you look at the retail and you look at the shots, they write under them, catwalk lit, and I think there is something about that.
It's a way of marketing clothes. And you took the other word, my next least favourite word after content is assets, and we all need, especially in e-commerce, everybody needs assets like these, and if it's a runway image, it really helps.
I think that is the thing with but then it's interesting with this because quite a lot of the reviews were a little bit negative, and they kind of said, there's no direction to the show, which is because it's a,
what
the
direction
studio did it. But then,
exactly.
And I didn't, I don't think I didn't love it, but I actually, the lack of direction was my least problem. I don't
think there was a lack of direction. I think there was, it was a fairly pretty collection.
I mean, I think it's very respectable.
Sorry to use the word commercial, but again, talking about the proper dressing appropriately, you would buy that.
The more structured stuff I thought looked a little dated, like the earlier stuff that we saw that opened it was a little bit more.
But even this look could have been a bit.
But can you imagine, I guess, with Peter's departure and then suddenly, where are we going next? It's not an atmosphere that is conducive to coming up with a vision, is it? And I think the codes of the house are there. I think there's, definitely there are crowd pleasers and customer pleasers in there, and I don't know, they're probably missing a few of the big grand ball gowns. But
I don't think there were many ball gowns here, but all these, the little crop jacket over the long. I mean, they're all Oscars.
Absolutely.
Elements. And also the straight hair was something new here, because normally loves a bit of hair up.
But I just think, what does it mean when the fact that Mr. De La Renta himself picked Peter, and the kind of business side can go against that with that's what I find strange, is like who's making the decisions.
The customer's making the decisions, honestly.
But then can the customer make a decision in TC? It's like
but they're not prepared to wait.
I guess so.
Because somebody who has a really strong business in Oscar de la Renta, by the time they get to their third season, if it's not working the way they want it to work,
they're not going to hang around.
They're not going to hang around, and that's the pressure these days. It's enormous.
But often I do think designers are tasked with fixing business problems. They're expected to somehow magically be able to sell the collection in a completely new market and increase the digital presence and get more. And it's like those are strategy issues. You can have the best designer in the world, but if you don't have someone that's good at communication, if you don't have someone that's good at kind of planning in terms of that's why Vetements is so successful. Demna is a brilliant designer, but it's Gurram, his brother, who
does it all.
He knows how much to say, actually, we're not going to sell this many to this retailer, we're going to deliver at this time. And I wonder
it's the same is happening with Valentino. I mean, Valentino, the whole operation, you just mentioned it earlier, when they first started, Maria Grazia and Pierpaolo, actually the collection were really weird. Some of them were really didn't understand what was going on, and then it all started with a lot. Marketing became before even the collections. When they started to get all these young jeunesse dorée of Europe, getting dressed in Valentino, and then the stylist Carl Temper started to work with them, and you can see a different. So
it's that whole team effort.
It's the whole team effort that actually worked very well under the direction of a visionary CEO. That was Stefano Sassi.
There's a lot of issues with Oscar de la Renta in terms of, as a business, in terms of, trying to get a better focus on accessories, whatever. It's like, a designer company is great, but they're not going to fix those things,
No.
And I think...
But, also, there was no communication director for a bit. I remember Oscar Piarga, she left maybe a couple of months after.
She did,
So there was no direction.
And she was really strong before.
And, the advertising campaign was something a bit... nothing crazy, I don't want to say lame, but there was nothing out there, especially today where the imagery is so important.
I like that Dave Sims picture, but it didn't get it didn't seem to go anywhere because there was no
exactly.
I agree with you there. But maybe this will be interesting to see how the strategy has changed, not just the design has changed.
And isn't that the way of so many things, though? It's a combination of you know, all your planets have got to align for
Yeah.
success to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I was just watching the Paralympics last night, and the girl who came second in a swimming race was, you know, talking about the trainer, the winner. And you know, it's all. It's not enough just to be brilliant, but a brilliant individual.
You need the
You've
team.
got to have
You need
team.
the team.
You do need the teams. Oh, I like her little dance that she just
Her
did.
little
She went
shimmy
off.
at the
It's really fabulous. Love her. She's great. I think I'm interested to see.
I mean, it's a collection. That, you know, I didn't.
I know. I know what you
It didn't
mean,
make me
yeah.
scream and didn't make me. Well, you know, I saw Monse collection and really enjoyed it.
Was
Every
exciting,
single outfit.
yeah.
I'm fascinated to see what
You know, it's
they
a studio. You know, a poor
yeah.
studio. What can they do?
Yeah.
You know, there is no hope for them because you know you never know. They might just lose their job next season when the new creative director arrives. So there is not even any push for
Well, I
making.
think it's becoming a bit of a fashion cliche because there are so many collections being done by studios at the moment to say, oh, it lacked direction. And I actually think some of the collections done by studios have had more direction than when a designer's there, but people just say it because it's like an easy criticism. But actually, I felt like this was quite cohesive. It felt like quite a well-edited collection. There's not any
well
like, bizarre
edited.
dresses
You know, it was
appearing.
perfectly nice.
Like even if you look at it from far away, you know, like the colours, it's not like a bizarre. Like,
Yeah, that first section of white dresses was really pretty. I'm sure that'll do
The
really
first part,
well.
yes.
Yeah, really nice. I think the lace is
You know, it was all
absolutely
neat where
gorgeous.
the
This kind of, you know,
I
bell
love the girl
skirted.
in the pink dress. She's so sassy.
She's having such a good time.
She's the best time ever. That is quite a fabulous dress, though. It's like if you wore that to something, you would be.
Yeah.
But I love that kind of femininity where it's like that's not kind of saccharine or sweet at all. You'd be quite freaked out by that girl. You know, she's intimidatingly kind of feminine.
Maybe you should wear that to the next GQ
Shall I?
Man of the
I
Year
think-
next year.
Like knocking
Yeah, the
people over my
GQ
shoulder.
The
awards.
GQ,
Off you go.
the GQ award and see what
You could
happens.
really give someone like a good shove, couldn't you?
Put your name down for that one, Lou.
So should we, you know, going back to what we were talking about at the start, should we be, oh, it's nice that that's sweet. I didn't know that they'd all come out. That's very cute. That's very sweet. Should we shouldn't be too despairing then about this constant turnover. You think we just have to move with the times in terms of...
I find it poignant, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, I'm not super happy about it. It makes me feel a bit, you know, in a dark day, I feel a bit depressed about it. But I think it's a new reality, and we've just got to get our heads around it. And some of it will work, some of it won't.
And you're right, actually, maybe it's more of a kind of public jury now. The fact that you can see opinions so quickly on social media, and, you know, we were talking about how the customer, you know, their spending power has more of a say than ever. Maybe we need to wake up and be like, actually, the control is with the customer, and that's
Well,
what
and
it
that's
should be,
what's
you know,
driving the whole see now, buy now thing, and people
Yeah.
actually fundamentally changing their business.
Well, collections are going to be
model.
designed based on, you know, it's designed by committee now, isn't it? It's like something sells, they'll do it again. Something, you know, I think.
And we've got yet to we have yet to see, what effect that's going to have on the kind of visual impact of.
That's
the
what
shop.
I think. Also, in innovation, what fashion is so good at is, you know, the best designers are like almost too early for their time. Like they make a collection that makes sense sometimes the next season, sometimes in 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And I wonder that those kind of designers, and those are the ones that move the pace of fashion forward, you know, that they are not going to be able to operate. Because if everything has to be for the now, how does anything kind of... Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, I mean it's
scary, isn't it?
It is kind of scary. And
But,
again,
yeah, but then, you know,
again we have to get on with it.
I don't know, sometimes I think I'm kind of in the steam age, and that, you know, as soon as a car comes along, I say, oh no, I'm sure it's going too fast, it'll kill me. But, you know, if I look at what my son is into and all those kind of streetwear brands, they drop continually, you know, and they have queues around the block
they're
for that.
fascinating. I'm like obsessed with, and I think fashion is cottoning on to brands like Panelist and Supreme and how they've
Exactly.
operated, because they have better strategies. They're more exclusive, you know, even though they're
then,
so
then
open.
those big brands, absolutely. I mean, Supreme is a
Fascinating.
fantastic example.
So clever, like they don't feel kind of lofty or rude. They're very aware of their consumer, but it also doesn't feel like they're pushing product.
And they
on
have a real
people.
community around
Real
them. as
communities.
well.
They do these really great drops, you know, when something's coming. And I just think fashion. I think it felt like fashion was shoving itself at people, and then, you know, buy this, and
Yeah.
what's good with those streetwear brands, like, come to us, you know,
Yeah.
like then people do, they come flocking, and I wonder.
Yeah,
when
and
you
things
see a
sell out, and they
Palace
let them
Oscar
sell
de la
out.
Renta
A mashup.
I know, it's perfect. I liked your sentiment there. We just need to get on with it. That's quite a good motivational comment to start the
Well,
season.
you know, they actually completely flat out our jobs, you know, like get on with it and, you know, don't even have an opinion anymore because, you know, what my opinion counts. Because it's so, you know, left to the world via Instagram and whatever. But, you know, there is always a risk. You know, that's what I never understand when you said before, okay, you can have a lot of likes on an Instagram image of, you know, the white dress from Oscar de la Renta, and then maybe they will sell one in the world. So, you know, there is literally this major discrepancy and, you know, like a big canyon between what's on social media, what's the reality of it. And again, this is still to be explored because we don't know. Okay, designers are now doing the see now by now in order to cut that canyon, you know, just to flatten it up. But how long is it going to last? I mean, is the quality going to be threatened? I mean, there are a lot of questions. There's so many questions. I mean, as you said, you know, Ralph Lauren's doing the same, you know, doing this.
It's good for us though, because there's so much to talk about.
Yes, exactly.
I know, exactly, yes.
Gift for me is a panel chair, because I'm like so many different things. Well, shall we give the studio a round of applause? And as we said, await with great excitement for next season, for the Monse debut.
But I must say, for what I've seen so far in New York, it's been a great season.
Yeah, very
That's good.
interesting.
And you know, actually, because I'm normally very negative on New York, as you could have heard me many times here on the panels. But I must say, from what Proenza's done,
Proenza's great.
and you know, some other youngsters that are happening there, I think it's a good start of the season.
Yeah, I agree.
We just have to see London, where I'm a bit nervous about, but you know.
That was a good amount of optimism there. Should we give the studio a round of applause?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.